I'm Brandon,
And I'm Mom.
and welcome back to Tansson Talks TV.
Yep, we're so happy to have you here with us today.
Yeah, and so, Mom, how are you doing today?
I am doing fine, Brandon. It is a cool December day, but that's okay. We're getting ready for the holidays to join us.
Yeah, and so, Mom, what series are we speaking about here today?
Today, we're going to talk about Benson.
I'm very excited for us to get into this, and this is episode 78 of the series, skipping a little ahead, for the episode Mary and Her Lambs.
Yep, 'tis the season.
Yes, 'tis the season for Tansson Talks TV, and we are speaking about our favorite holiday episodes and exploring, and so this is from season 4 of Benson, episode 10. And just to give you all a little bit of synopsis as to the show, since we have not discussed this yet on the series. So, Benson is a TV series about the character of Benson Dubois, who is a state budget director for unspecified state. And so he works in the governor's mansion, and so the series generally shows his interactions with the governor of the state alongside the chief and staff and head of household affairs. And so overall, it is a nice, fun situational comedy. And this aired from 1979 to 1986 for 7 seasons.
Yep. Thank you, Brandon. That was a great synopsis.
Yeah, of course. And I also did want to note that this is also a spin-off series. We've spoken about a few different spin-off series, before on Tansson Talks TV. And so this is a spin-off of the series Soap that aired for 4 seasons from 77 to 81. And so Benson was the butler in that show, and he got his own series after episode 50. And so, yeah, we definitely have seen quite a bit of Benson, but Mom, I'll let you tell the audience about that.
Yes, well, Brandon, just so your audience knows that Benson, of course, was on when I was little, but I didn't watch it the original time around. I saw some episodes bits here and there, but I didn't really watch it at the time. But you and I kind of discovered Benson one day. We were just sitting and watching TV, and we watched one episode and laughed hysterically, and and so we said, "Well, let's." Binge this as we normally do for some of our shows. And we ended up watching probably about 2 3 months that we watched Benson, nonstop. And I will say that I didn't realize how funny the show was when it was originally on. You, of course, I know this was all for new for you, and I know that you laughed along with us, along with your brother. And so I think we could say they thoroughly enjoyed watching all of Benson. Would you agree, Brandon?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I will say that I think there's still a few episodes in the final season that we have, missed in our 1 or 2 rounds of going through the series. But yeah, it definitely provides a lot of laughs. And I am just very excited for us to head into this holiday episode produced by Thomas Harris Productions.
All right. And this particular episode, which is called Mary and Her Lambs, which came out in 1982 and is kind of episode 78 of Benson. But in this episode, a sub character was kind of introduced. Her name is Mary, and Mary is a new assistant cook at the governor's house. She brings with her 2 children, who they're really 2 teenage children. Um, and she's not legally adopted these children yet, but she wants them to live. These children have been living with her for years. She's been caretaking for them. Um, However, since she has not legally adopted these children, the government kind of wants to take the children from her and place them in an orphanage. And so the children, of course, do not want to do this because they love their caretaker who's been with them for a long time. And so Mary kind of looks for Benson to kind of help guide her in the situation. And Mary has a lot of faith, and she believes that Benson and those around him will be able to help her in this situation. And so in the end, Benson actually ends up is able to help her. A book kind of falls into his lap per se, and so he finds a code that that can designate her place or her room in the governor's mansion as an orphanage. And if the governor is able to kind of do that for her, then she'd be able to keep her children because, in fact, the children are in an orphanage. And then at the end of the episode, everyone gathers around to actually sing at the Christmas tree, because it is a holiday episode. And of course, throughout the episode itself, there's mentions of the holiday and people buying gifts and things like that. But the general synopsis is really about Mary and her two children per se. And Mary, I will say, is a character that we only see for this one episode, but I think the episode is profound because you do remember it. I do remember this episode, Brandon, when it aired. I won't say how many years ago, but I do remember it when it aired, or either I saw it in reruns, and it stood out at that time period. At that time, I didn't know why. For me, it stood out because when we talked about holiday episodes, this is one that came straight to mind to me. And even when we watched it the first time, I knew that something was missing, and I may just go back and find that one little piece that was missing that was not at the episode one version of the episode that we saw. And so, for that reason, those reasons, we kind of picked it, or I picked it as one of the holiday episodes that I like because it just stood out, and I remember it from a little girl.
Yeah, and first of all, thank you so much for letting us know about this episode.
You are welcome, Brandon.
Yeah, and like you said, you did not even really watch this series, but it did stand out to you all of these years later.
It did. It did.
Yeah, and I will say that, for us doing this discussion, we did see the full episode on the Roku channel, which is free. So, yeah, so for those watching who haven't seen the episode, be sure to go ahead and check out the full episode. But yeah, I mean, I would say that this is definitely a very memorable episode and very much fits in to the normal way of how a Benson episode is. But I think just adds a little bit of something for everyone and all of the characters to really shine their brightest this episode.
Yep, that's a good choice of words, but yes, it does.
Yeah, and so before we analyze this episode a little further, I do know that that for these holiday episodes that you have seen a little bit of a framework in the sense with your top 10 that you notice within holiday episodes. And so, Mom, I'll let you do the honors.
Alrighty. And so my top 10. First of all, nostalgic. And this episode to me was very nostalgic because it does have a cute dilemma to it. I mean, we've got Mary, and she wants to keep her two children. So children are involved in this particular episode. And it's just very memorable. Just really for me, like I said, the end was the most memorable part of it. And I'll go into that in just a little bit. But it brings back that homey feel that you look for in an episode, in a holiday episode. And then number two has to do with the discussion of the tree. I think for each of the episodes we talked about, there's been some sort of discussion of the Christmas tree, and in this particular episode, it kind of comes out more so at the end. At the end, while everyone's sitting around the piano singing, there's a star that shines brightly at the end, and this happens at midnight. And then not only does the star shine brightly at the end, but then the whole tree kind of glows right afterwards. So they let the star come out first, and then the tree kind of glows for the rest of the episode. And then the songs. This to me is probably the most memorable part of this particular episode, and this is what I remembered distinctly. One of the two things I remember distinctly about it. At the end of as they ended the episode, all of the regular stars each sang some sort of a solo, and that just stood out. They were very nice. Christmas songs that they sang, and they were the songs that you just kind of remember growing up for the holidays. And so it was nice to see all of them come through with their solos, and all within their kind of personalities that they do have on Benson. And it was nice to watch them as they kind of made way for each other to sing those particular songs. And and what I like is that they actually let them sing, for the most part, the whole song, not just a little, here's my one line and then you do your one line. They let each of them stand out in their own light with a song. Let's see, perfect gift. And so in this episode, the perfect gift was really that Mary got a chance to have her children stay with her. And I think that was the overall perfect gift, was to have her let the children be able to stay with her. Santa, there were two. So, and of course, as you know, Santa just stands out in every episode. But in this case, the Santas were the governor and Clayton. And Clayton, who has such an interesting he just had interesting characteristics. And when he came out and just said, "Oh, I love Christmas," and then he went on and he put on the Santa suit, it was just kind of funny to watch as two Santas kind of walked in together. So there were two Santas in this episode. Um, Family feeling, yes, there was a family feeling to me on so many levels on this show, on this particular episode, because not only was there family feeling because of the children being able to stay with Mary, but I think the family feeling of the cast itself, it just seemed to stand out as they allowed themselves to kind of have their moment to sing these particular their songs that they were going to sing, but then the fact that they all kind of stood around at the tree and the piano at the end kind of led into a very nice family feel. And even though Mary was the guest star in this, they just kind of let her stand back on this time to let the original cast members do what they do best. Cute kid, yeah, there were cute kids here. First of all, we had kids come from an orphanage. Even though they were in the back of the scene. There were kids there. Of course, Katie was there, but then also Katie, who's the governor's daughter. But then the two kids who were with, even though they were teenagers, they kind of introduced them in a nice way. So there was that family relationship that was there. So the kids were there. Sense of innocence. I think the innocence in this case came from Mary. And I say that because Mary believed, and she believed that everything was going to work out. And so, in that sense, everything just kind of fell into place for her. And then, even when as Benson was speaking and kind of figuring out how to help, when the book kind of fell, it was kind of like, oh, here's that mystical innocence thing that oh, this is how it happened. Even Benson even made a comment about how, it's like, oh, really? The book just falls in my lap. No one's here to witness this. But there is a sense of innocence in the particular episode. A memorable quote. For me, the quote actually is not so much. There are two things that are going on. First of all, Mary says that she thinks that everything kind of happens for a reason and everything will work out. And she kind of says that, maybe not as directly as that, but she does say that throughout the episode. But for me, the memorable quote actually came from Krause, because at the very, very end, and maybe this is why I remember this so well also, is that Krause came out of character, and she said that Krause would say, Mary, well, let me back up a little bit. At the very end of the episode, after everyone sang, kind of like in the closing section, each cast member said Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays in some sort of way. And then when it was Krause's turn to speak, or Inga Swinson's turn to speak, she said Krause would say Merry Christmas like this. But then she used her own voice, because I don't think a lot of people knew that Ingo was not from Germany, or at least the perception anyway at that time period, where she used her regular voice to say Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays. And so for me, the memorable part may not have been necessarily what was said, but how it was said. And so, in which case, that's where the memorable quote comes in for me for this particular episode. And Brandon, that is our top 10.
Well, thank you, Mom, for that.
You are welcome.
Yeah, and I think there's so much to take away from this episode, and I mean the series as a whole as well. But yeah, but before I dive into that, I did want to say, Mom, I know that we have a theme song once again, and so I'll let you do your thing in terms of speaking about it.
Oh yeah. Okay. This is what I liked about this particular episode. Benson has two different versions. They're both instrumental, but they have the long version and the short version. And a lot of times you can't even tell the short version is really used because it's been used so often. As soon as we turned it on, this was the long version. It was just a long instrumental, and it was so nice to see the nice long instrumental. And so I gave this one for instrumental songs. I give it a 9 because it just you know, I like that they use long version, and that's something that we've talked about before. That I really appreciate shows that are still willing to have the long version air.
Yeah, and I will say that oftentimes when we see different TV shows, but especially for Benson, on TV we see the syndicated cut up version of the theme song where it's over in 30 seconds. But yes, we were able to see the full version of this episode to include the full version of the theme song, and it's a nice, fun, it's a very fun instrumental theme song, and I think it just does really well to also show all of the different characters and their funny quirks that they have to them.
Yeah, I like those little extra scenes that kind of pop up because it is a longer version.
Yeah, and overall, what would you say is like a highlight for you of this series? Like, why do we keep going back to it?
I don't know. I think there's something innately just funny about the show itself. The characters seem to all, uh, I want to say get along, but the characters all seem to kind of mesh well together, and that they've done a good job in establishing each of the characters. And I don't think they deviate that far from the characters. Some of the episodes do leave you a little uneasy, but I think that's a good thing. That they're able to kind of get you to think a certain way, but I think that Benson is just funny in himself, and I didn't realize how much. And he does do a little bit of the talking to the camera at times. And when we, of course, as a little girl, I wouldn't have been able to pick that up. But now watching this back in reruns, he does do it, and they have a nice little segue into soap, and they do let soap come on for a couple of episodes, and actually, soap actually somewhat ended on Benson. So it was nice to see it. Now I have not seen all the episodes of Soap, but I've seen some here and there, and so maybe that'll be one of ours that we binge one day. But I just think that Benson just stands out. The characters work well. I like that characters who actually left the show, they leave the show and they explain the why, and they let them have their episode to leave out also.
And I will also say too that, as a bit of context for those who are unfamiliar with either Benson or Soap, so the series Soap, while it was a sitcom, was a very untraditional sitcom in the sense that it was a parody of a soap opera, and so you had a whole bunch of very abnormal hijinks throughout every aspect of the series. But whereas Benson is a more traditional sitcom, however, has probably just as many hijinks, but in a more normalized setting.
Yep, you summarized that well, Brandon.
Yeah, and so I will say so. For you thinking about the series before we go back into speaking about the episode itself. So, what are your thoughts about the character of Benson, and then some of the other main characters, such as the governor and his chief of staff Clayton and Krause?
Well, I thought they all, like I said, the show was consistent in the characters and how they developed them. What I really liked about Benson himself is the way they developed him as a character. How you saw him grow as just someone who was there to kind of handle the household budget per se, or just kind of oversee the household, to let him grow to be the lieutenant governor, and how they kind of grew that into the role for him. And even some of the jealousies that came from maybe even Clayton as he was growing, saying Clayton thinking that he could do the same job. So I like that they grew the character of Benson throughout. It's the same with Krause. Krause actually grew as a character too, and they allowed her to move up in her position. Clayton was a lawyer, although you never know that. I like that they used the fact that Clayton was a lawyer, in some of the episodes to show that Clayton was there to help. And so even though he didn't practice law on a regular basis, because we're not quite sure what Clayton did there. But but when he did practice law, it was interesting to watch him practice law, and I like that. The governor itself, I think the governor grew also. The governor was as goofy as ever, but he, at the same time, he had a sound mind for what he wanted for the people that he did, who he was the governor for. And then he had a good relationship with his daughter also. And so I like that this series was good and that they allowed their characters to grow as people. And then, of course, Katie was young, and I really liked the relationship that they established with Katie and Benson. And I think Krause even made a comment in one of the episodes where she said that she liked how Benson was with Katie.
And I will say too that I think what's interesting is you can see like the different characters and the respect that they have for each other, but yet also the somewhat antagonistic relationship that Benson has with practically almost everyone minus Katie and the governor.
Yep, that's true. Well, sometimes with the governor too, but yeah, very true.
Yeah, he's someone that can definitely hold his own and has his own thoughts and mindset. And I like that, like you said, the series is able to, to grow, and that sometimes you might have certain characters who come in and out of the series, but I think that it all sort of works itself out, and I love the dynamic that they all have with each other, and you can see even when the series ended, even though it didn't have a true conclusion per se, that
Hmm.
at least you could see the growth that happened with there and sort of the evolution from episode one to the final episode.
Yep, you sure can.
Yeah, and I will say too, so yeah, so for this series, well, for this episode rather, so what were your thoughts overall about, I guess seeing a different light to some of these characters? Like we're able to see Quaden, who typically doesn't care about anything, the governor's chief of staff, to being like very wholeheartedly like loving Christmas in this episode, and even like the different decorations that we're doing. And I mean, what were your thoughts overall for this episode?
Well, like I said, I really like the episode. I like that they kind of let everyone have a little fun with the episode. And it was fun to watch as people were, like Denise and Peter, as they were trying to figure out what they're buying each other. I mean, that was kind of fun to watch. And so it was just, to me, it's just kind of a nice episode. And I thought that they did a good job of just letting them kind of stand out a little bit.
Yeah, I think the episode did a really good job with that too. And before we begin closing out our discussion, though, I did want to say, so this is the second production that we have spoken about, created by Whit Thomas Harris, and the other one being the series The Golden Girls. And so, what are your thoughts about the relationship that Benson has with the Golden Girls as a series?
Well, you and I noticed a couple of things, Bran, and one of the things that we noticed that there was one episode that kind of mimicked the other episode from the Golden Girls and from Benson. And then we've started to notice that in general, as we're watching series, when we notice that there's certain same per se producers or writers or things that there are certain episodes that just kind of come back again. So that was one of the things I did notice, is that there were a couple episodes in the show which mimicked the Golden Girls. Well, I should say, yeah, the Golden Girls would have mimicked Benson, where the Golden Girls kind of mimicked Benson in regards to storyline purposes. But I think the quick wittiness of the characters, I think that's something that's common in both shows, and that they're both able to have characters that speak their mind, and they speak their mind very clearly what they believe. Kind of like, I mean, the Golden Girls, all four of them do that all the time, and the same with Benson and the governor and Clayton and Krause.
Yeah, I definitely will say that. Yeah, there's so many similarities that more than enough that we can get into in this particular discussion. But I just thought it so interesting because we were very familiar with the Golden Girls, and it wasn't until this year that we really got into Benson. But yeah, it's fun to see all the different similarities and even some of the guest stars who show up as very similar characters, or at least similar characteristic characters.
Yep, that's very true. We have seen those same characters go from one show to the other. Or I should say, it's the side character, the extra characters that we've seen go from one to the other. And one character that although he was not on the Golden Girls, was Seinfeld. And we saw that Seinfeld actually was on Benson for 3 or 4 episodes, maybe. He was didn't stay long, but it was interesting to watch. And it's like, oh, that's Seinfeld there.
Yeah, so I mean, I feel like it has a whole bunch. The show has a whole bunch of little things that you can really like dive into, and so I love all of our little TV discussion connections that you can see within within these episodes.
Yep, same here.
Well, yeah. Well, unless you have anything else, I say that we can go ahead and wrap up this discussion.
All right, no, Brandon, I think we have hit everything for this episode.
Yeah, and of course, if there's any other shows or episodes that you want us to see, go ahead and let us know.
Yep, and let us know what are your favorite holiday shows that, even though the season is kind of wrapping up, we have one more show that I know that we want to discuss for next week. That'll be a holiday show. Um, but if there are any other shows that kind of stand out for you as favorite holiday shows, please let us know in the comments below. We'd love to know what they are. And then if you remember, I'm sorry, Brandon, if you do remember this episode of Benson, and let us know what stood out for you also.
Yeah, and if you have a favorite episode of Benson or want to get into the series, let us know as well. Would love to, yeah, to follow your viewing habits.
Yep, we sure would.
Well, yeah, well, Mom, this has been fun as always, and I can't wait until the next one.
Same here, Brandon.
Yeah, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
All right, y'all have a great day.
Bye.
Bye bye.